Welcome to the New England Football Show, presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. Kevin, how are you this evening?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Doing all right on this election night eve. Big day tomorrow, and it'll be an interesting day, to say the least. It always is every 4 years. Before we start talking some football here, I do want to remind you that if you're in the market to sell your current home or purchase your first home, or you're looking to refinance, then give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also email him at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, Herb has the knowledge and the know-how to help you in the purchasing process. Now more than ever, you need reliable people on your side when you make a major purchase like buying a home. Well, you want Herb Devine on your side. Give him a call again at 781-254-2846, or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. If you're ready to get into your first or next home or refi, get in touch with Herb now. All right, so Patriots losing in overtime yesterday to the Tennessee Titans, 20-17. I think, Kevin, we all thought that this was a game they could win. Sure enough, they go down to Tennessee. They play pretty poorly. Drake May really the only lone bright spot. Defense kept them in the game, but couldn't make a play when they needed it. Bottom line is they lose to drop to 2-7. The only silver lining is of right now, they would have the number one pick in next year's NFL draft. If you ask some people around town, they want this to stay true to form and have them end up with the number one pick. Regardless of what you think, another disappointing loss. But I will say this, and I saw a lot of people talking about this today, Kevin. Drake May, despite being up and down, I didn't think he played a clean game. He threw his first two career interceptions. Despite that, though, in many ways, he was the lone bright spot in that game.
He's your only offense right now. Like, it's literally him and then everybody else kind of not doing anything. Look, it was frustrating, but it just comes down to two things for me. One, the staff let them down again in several areas, in my opinion, and they're just not that talented. You don't have someone that dictates coverage on offense, and I think we all knew that, but for whatever reason, it sort of hit me yesterday, I guess glaringly for the first time. They have nobody that anybody's worried about. And again, we all knew that, but yesterday it shines
Well,
through.
it shows up. I think the reason you noticed it yesterday is because it was a close game. They were in it. It was a game where if you make one or two plays, it could swing the game in your favor, and they didn't have anybody that could make one or two plays.
Right. And there's no, and just look at the last play of the game. Like, the quarterback shouldn't have to scramble 5 yards out for 12.
Over 11 seconds. I think it was something like 11.2 seconds.
Yeah.
He
So,
scrambled.
but it's what we knew. The talent around him is going to hurt him the rest of the year. But yeah, it's nice you have the guy. I love kind of more the way he handles stuff post game. He's really hard on himself very early on in his career. So that's probably the more encouraging thing to me than anything else. You can speak to him sort of protecting himself better than I could, but it feels like he's taking a lot of unnecessary hits already, and he's obviously not going to be able to live that way for the rest of his career. But it's early; he'll learn, as Mayo said. This is more about the staff to me than anything else. Though before halftime again is a disaster. You have two chunk plays to Bourne, and then you run it twice. You can't get a first down within a yard. With about 4 minutes to go, right after the Titans scored to take the lead, when they first had a chance to go down and drive, I tweeted out they should go for two if they scored. And 2 minutes later, they had another chance and didn't do it. And Mayo, again, has refused to kind of talk about it twice now, which makes me think that's not his call. He talked a lot in the offseason about having Evan Rothstein in his ear and I forget what title that they gave him. I think it was like game manager or game coordinator, whatever it is. But I feel like that wasn't Mayo's call. We can debate on that, or if you agree, whatever. But should have gone for two. I think you're 2-6. You don't need the win that badly. You mentioned the draft choice. If you lose that game still, well, at least you went down fighting in the locker room, sort of feels good about you having confidence in the offense. So again, I put this on the staff more than anything. That first half was embarrassing. 5 first downs, 124 yards. For all the good stuff I said about AVP last week, equally as bad this week. And again, we say this every week now. It's not going to get much better. I don't know if there's a winnable game on the schedule the rest of the way. Maybe this week, but I don't know if you can score with Chicago, maybe Arizona, and maybe Indianapolis. Other than that, they're not more than a 2 or 3 win team at this point. So disappointing, but I guess not surprising, if that makes sense.
Ken Matias joins the show. I want your guys' opinion on the Pats' final drive in OT that led to the May pick. Why would he not just drive the field and not throw 50 or 60 yards? That's a good question. I mean, I don't think his intention was to throw a pick. You got to remember that they were almost at 2 minutes left in the game at that point, so they needed chunk plays. Now, you can argue whether or not he should have taken a shot there, but the bottom line is he's pressing, he's trying to make a play, throws it into double coverage, it gets picked.
So just real quick on that, they picked the wrong side in overtime. He was throwing into the wind. So yes, I know what he's saying, but that didn't help him either. Just sort of another part of the staff not helping out this week.
Well, I don't think the wind was a factor yesterday, so that doesn't really matter unless the wind is a factor. I mean,
either way, just another sort of weird thing the staff did yesterday.
Yeah. I don't blame it as much on the staff. I don't think that the offensive game plan was great. I think that their running game has been embarrassingly bad. They're averaging, I think, 2 yards a carry, or they averaged just about 2 yards
total.
a carry.
15 yards total yesterday from the backs.
Yeah. I mean, so you could put that on the staff, but I still think this comes down to talent. You can have Bill Walsh in his prime running this offense, and I don't think they'd be that much better. I really don't. And I know people have made the argument, well, if Cliff Kingsbury was coaching this offense, they'd be better, or if so-and-so was and so-and-so was. The bottom line is you don't have enough pieces. How many years are we going to say this? How many years are we going to continue to look at the same cast of characters and say, well, it's not the players, it's the coaching? It can't always be the coaching. Ultimately, it comes down to players. This is the ultimate player sport, more so than anybody, more so than any other sport. So in my opinion, yes, I didn't think the coaching was very good yesterday in certain spots. I agree with you there. Yes, I thought that the offensive game plan made no sense in a lot of ways. But the bottom line is they're not good up front. They don't have a dynamic playmaker, a wide receiver. They don't have the ability to make big plays. They are what they are, which is a team in this league that's going to average anywhere from 17 to 21 points on a week-to-week basis, which in this league, if you're not hitting at least 28 per week, you have no shot of consistently winning games. They're incapable of doing that. They don't have it. The lone bright spot is May. But look, and I said this yesterday after the game with John Lyons, if they don't, they have a lot more holes on this team than just offensive line and wide receiver. Those are certainly two glaring needs. But they have a lot of needs on defense, too. Let's not kid ourselves. That game was very misleading yesterday because they got a turnover, they got the sack, they held them to 20 points. That offense has struggled all year. You should have held them to probably less than that. I think at the end of the day, I think that they've got a lot more to fix than meets the eye. And I think that this, while yes, the coaching could be better, ultimately it still comes down to a lack of talent.
No, I hear you. Defensively, that's probably the bigger issue. Just how bad they are on third down and in the run game. That overtime drive, look, I know you're gassed, but it's Mason Rudolph and Tony Pollard. It shouldn't have looked that easy, especially after seeing what your quarterback just did for 2 hours, basically running for his life the entire game. So that's probably more frustrating than the offense even is to me, is just how bad this defense is right now.
Ken checks back in. AVP definitely told May and called that deep shot down the field. No knock on May because he does what he can. Well, yes. I mean, I don't think you're privy to the call, Ken, and thank you for checking in again. I don't think you're privy to the call. We don't know. I'd have to go back and watch the film and see what the concept was and try to decipher what the route progression would have been there. Obviously, that ball was in the play call, so it could have very well been his first read in his progression. Bottom line is they probably pressed there. They didn't need to push the ball down the field. To your earlier point, Ken, they didn't need to push the ball down the field there. They did. He made a poor decision. He threw a pick. Okay, look, here's the thing. If that's not his first read and he's getting greedy there, that's on him ultimately. Again, you have to watch the play, see what the concept was, see what the route design was, and then kind of make a determination from there. Look, they lost this game way before that interception, okay? The fact that they were even in it in the fourth quarter, and look, it was a bad game for 3 quarters. Both teams picked it up in the fourth quarter, but the fact that the Patriots were in that game obviously is a testament to how tough May is and how well he played down the stretch, but he also hurt you. He also threw 2 bad interceptions. And Kevin, you brought this up earlier. Yeah, he had 8 rushes for 95 yards, but I'm not sure you want him running as much as he has been, because right now he looks more like Steve Grogan than a franchise quarterback. You want him to take better care of himself, because he's not going to last. Even if he puts on 5, 10, 15 pounds in the offseason, he's not going to last if he's running around taking shots like that. But going back to your point about the defense, that was a disappointing finish there, because once again, Tennessee did to them what other teams have done to them all season long, which is when they need to make a play in a key situation, they just line up and run at them. They just line up and run the football. Tennessee did that. They're able to go down. Old friend Nick Folk kicks a 25-yard field goal, and that proves to be the game winner. But, going back to what you said earlier, Kevin, yeah, I mean, when you look at the rest of their schedule, the teams you just mentioned, Indianapolis, maybe Arizona, they're playing a lot better than people thought. Those are probably your most winnable games. Beyond that, I mean, you're hard-pressed to find another one. Again, this team at best, as we've been saying all along, this team at best is probably 5-12.
Yeah, and the other thing too, like, it's nice yesterday when they're on the road, you have a chance to watch Red Zone, and watching the other teams play. They're the worst of those, that bunch of 2-7 teams. I think there's 7 2-7 teams right now. I don't think there's a question that they're the worst one of the bunch. They're not as good as Cleveland right now offensively. They're not as good as maybe even the Giants or the Raiders, I don't think. Their lack of talent on offense is so glaring. And you're right, it shines through yesterday because Tennessee's terrible. And you couldn't do anything. You physically couldn't do anything besides...
Well, the running game, not to cut you off, but the run, right, that's just it. You haven't had a 100-yard rusher since Ramondre Stevenson had 120 against the Bengals in week 1. Antonio Gibson came close a week after with 96 against Seattle, and then you had Drake May with 95 yesterday. I mean, this running game has been abhorrent. It's been terrible, and this was supposed to be their bread and butter. They were supposed to lean on their running game this season. It is one of the worst running games in the league. It's non-existent, and that's the problem here. Like you said, 15 yards out of your running backs yesterday. That's embarrassing, and that's the one thing in football, and I don't care what level it is, that's the one thing offensively you should be able to hang your hat on, that you're going to run the football. This team can't do that right now. And I think you can put some of it on the offensive line, but some of it falls on Van Pelt and the coaching and the play calling. So it's a bunch of things that's leading to them being ineffective offensively. But if you can't run the football, you cannot protect this kid. And I think that's the issue moving forward. Your running game is supposed to support this kid and make the passing game easier for him and create more opportunities in the passing game. But because your running game is piss poor, you can't do that.
And on the offensive line, why make that switch yesterday? You figured it out for 2 weeks. Any idea why they did it?
What switch are you talking about?
Moving on Wenu and having Lee.
If they've been playing musical chairs with him all year, it's a good question.
True.
I mean, it's that's part of the that's the other problem here, though, is that they have no consistency at guard. Guard has been a revolving door for them. Both sides have been. Michael Jordan didn't play well yesterday. Never thought I'd see the day I'd say this, but you miss Cole Strange. You need him back. Guard has been a revolving door, and right tackle has been a revolving door. They really want Vidarian Lowe to be the left tackle they're saying that they think he could potentially be that beyond this year. But the 2 guard spots, right tackle, it has been a revolving door, and it's going to continue to be a revolving door. Ken jumps back in. The Pats' run defense has been the weakest part of that side of the ball. Injuries with Duggar and missing Peppers has been hurting the defense. I do think that that's a good point, Kevin, and I don't think people are talking about that enough. You got to remember, you're playing without Barmore. Yesterday, you're without Duggar and Peppers. You're without Bentley. I mean, those are big losses. If they can get Barmore back, eventually you get Duggar and Peppers back, you would hope that this defense plays better once those guys are back. I mean, Barmore, we all knew when he went out with the blood clots that he would be a big loss. I don't think people realize he'd be this big of a loss. They miss him big time.
Having said that, I don't think you're getting Peppers back this year. I mean, you're dealing with a pretty serious allegation, so I don't think I don't think there's a shot you see him this year. Mayo was asked about Barmore this morning and said, "quote We're getting close." So it'd be nice to see him back. I'm still not sure it's worth bringing him back at this point this season, but that's a discussion for whenever he is able to come back. And then you might be losing pieces tomorrow. Like, we haven't even talked about the trade deadline yet. Duggar and Godshaw's name have both been coming up. So he's right, but you may be subtracting more than anything else here in the next, 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And I think that, again, we talked a little bit about it last week, and John and I talked about it on the postgame show about the fact that unless you can get a young impact player to add to this core for the future, and I know a lot of people have looked at what the Bears did last year, adding Montez Sweat at the deadline, unless you can make a similar move, the reality is you should be selling. You should be selling any pieces of value that can return draft capital and help you in the trade market next offseason and help you move around the draft board during draft weekend. Because at the end of the day, you're 2-7. And there are 3 or 4 guys on this roster right now that could be valuable to other teams. We're going to get to that in a sec. Real quick, I want to look ahead to the Chicago Bears. Bears have lost 2 in a row. Heartbreaking loss to the Commanders 2 weeks ago in the Hail Mary. They got absolutely whitewashed yesterday by the Cardinals, 29-9. They were never really in that game, especially after the second quarter. They look like a mess. Guys are running their mouths in the media. Matt Eberflus's coaching tenure there is on life support. Caleb Williams has looked very ordinary at times this season. He's looked good at times, and at other times, he's looked very ordinary. And Kevin, to be honest with you, I said that to people during draft time, that he had already reached the ceiling. And all you were going to get what you saw in college at his best. But the reality is, I felt he was going to struggle in the NFL because that street ball game he likes to play doesn't always translate. Patrick Mahomes is 1 of 1. I think this is a winnable game. This Chicago team right now has a culture problem in their locker room. They're doubting themselves offensively. Williams got banged up at the end of that game yesterday. They can't run the football. If the Patriots can find a way to keep this game close, it's a game that they could potentially steal. 3 weeks ago, there was no way on earth any of us would have said they can go into Chicago and win. Now, with the Bears reeling in 4-4, they have a shot.
Winnable game, yes. Do I expect them to? No. At this point, I can't call any game that they enter, especially on the road. I can't say with confidence that I think they'll win the game. After yesterday's performance, when you see their offense, I don't know if they can keep up with the Bears. And everything you just said about Chicago is obviously true, but they're people's get-right game now. Like, I'm fully expecting Chicago's offense to put up 20-something points. I don't know if you can get there. Like, even if it's 20 even, I don't know if you can get to 20 points. So, is it winnable? Of course. You have a good quarterback now. I just don't know if you can keep up ultimately with Chicago as much as they are struggling. And I do think they're a different team at home, albeit very slightly. But, no, I expect this to be a get-right game for the Bears.
Yeah, I think this will be a closer game than people think. I think Chicago's problems are legitimate. I think they've come back to earth. Look, Detroit proved yesterday they're clearly the best team in that division. You can make the argument they're the best team in the NFL. I know Kansas City is undefeated, but that's a very, very flaky 7-0 record there in Kansas City. They could very easily be 5-2, 4-3 as well. So I think you can make an argument that Detroit is the best team in the league. Certainly they're the best team in that division, but Chicago has come back down to earth. But to your point, I don't think the Patriots have enough offensively where they can outscore the Bears, where they can really outscore anybody on any given week. I just don't think they have enough. And yesterday was proof of that. Coming back to the trade deadline, we briefly started talking about it a couple minutes ago. Obviously, it's tomorrow at 4 p.m. I fully expect the Patriots to be sellers. I know that there's been some talk. There was some talk last week. Josina Anderson had reported that they could potentially be looking to add. One report I saw was that after beating the Jets, there was newfound confidence within the organization that they can go on a run. That one blew me away. I'm like, okay. But I don't expect them to be buyers. I do expect them to sell if there is a piece there that they feel that they can get a quality return in. Look, we've thrown around some of the names. Jonathan Jones. They've already traded Joshua Uche. Jonathan Jones is a possible trade target. Kendrick Bourne. I know Kyle Duggar's name was mentioned, but I don't see them moving him. I think they do see him as a part of their core. It would certainly take a big package to get him. You got Austin Hooper. There's some pieces there, some veteran pieces that could appeal to other teams if they're looking to add depth or guys that can play in sub packages. Do you see them making a deal between now and then, or do you think that Elliott Wolf is done?
I hope there's some stuff to come, and I hope they're not buyers. You need to stock draft picks. You've been saying this for months now. They need to go heavy offensive tackle or offensive line in general. I think you've said 3 picks at least in those first 3 rounds or whatever. But no, you need to stockpile draft picks. Bourne, Thornton, Osborne, Godshaw. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Those are the guys I'd try to move. I think moving Duggar's a mistake. You just re-signed him. He's one of those sort of core defensive guys who has now been through sort of both eras and can kind of bridge that gap between the old Patriots and the new Patriots, sort of. But if you can get something for him, sure, it's got to be worthwhile to move him, in my opinion. But everybody else that I just named, there shouldn't be a question. You should be trying to move them. And again, stockpile picks, whether you're going to take them or, hopefully use them in a trade as chips. But yeah, I'm expecting and more so hoping that they're active tomorrow as sellers and not buyers.
Ken checks back in. Who's the person that you guys feel that would be dealt first? I mean, I think a guy like Jonathan Jones probably has a ton of value to other teams.
That's a
guy you might be able to get a 3rd-round pick for, because you can never have enough defensive backs in this league, especially if you're in the AFC West or the NFC North, where teams, pretty much every team in the division, with the exception of the Raiders in the AFC West, but pretty much every team in the division has a quarterback and can throw the football effectively. I don't think you can have enough defensive backs in this league. So I think he's a guy, veteran guy, Super Bowl winner, a pro. He knows how to play the game. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. He can play some safety. He has a lot of value. That's a guy you might be able to get a good return for. Maybe a Kendrick Bourne. There are plenty of receiver needing teams out there, but I think it would have to be the right team. I don't think KJ Osborne fetches you much of a return. I don't think Austin Hooper fetches you much of a return. But that's about it. I mean, I don't really see who else they can trade on this roster. Those are the guys that were probably the most tradable. I don't see them moving Duggar. I don't see them moving Godshaw either.
So just on Jonathan Jones, I put him in the Duggar camp. I think you need a guy like him in that locker room, maybe even more so than Duggar. He's a little bit more vocal than Duggar is. But again, just as you mentioned, a veteran. And I go back to being able to bridge sort of the expectations around here back then and now. He knows what it takes to win, or at least has seen winning football in this culture. So I hope they don't move on from Jonathan Jones.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're serious about selling a guy like that, he's going to have a lot of value. He's going to have a lot of value. And I think that a guy like that, they have to be willing to move off of a guy like him. Even a guy like Hunter Henry. We haven't mentioned him, but I'll throw him out there. If the right offer comes along, you have to be willing to move on from a guy like that. Because again, as I've said all along, and I hate to beat the dead horse, but I'm going to do it again. This was a bridge year. They were punting on this year. So it's really about acquiring as much draft capital as you can get your hands on so that you can continue to rebuild this roster. This year is is a lost cause. It's really about being competitive, bringing along some of the young guys, but ultimately you weren't going to make the playoffs. This wasn't going to be some kind of a memorable season for the fans. It was going to be yet another year in the rebuild. The most important thing you needed to do this year was figure out when you were going to play Drake May and develop him. And that's what they're doing. He's developing nicely. And that's all that really matters at this point. They're not going to win more than 3 or 4 games realistically, maybe 5 if they're lucky. So at the end of the day, I think they are where they should be right now. Ken asks if John Jones is moved, who would step up in his absence? Well, I mean, you got Marco Wilson. You've got some guys in the secondary that they like, but I think ultimately one of those guys, one of those younger defensive backs, maybe a Marcellus Dial gets to play more in the secondary. Those guys are the guys that would have to step up. And you want to see what you have in those guys long term. If you move a John Jones, it creates an opportunity for some of these guys to play. I mean, it gives Marcus Jones now a chance to play even more snaps. He plays a bunch as it is. Speaking of him, by the way, and I talked about this in my 7 points, given their inability to make plays on offense, I thought about this morning. I'd like to see them go back to Matt Patricia in 2022 and start using this guy on offense. I mean, you see how dynamic he is as a punt returner. He's the one guy you have on your roster that can make plays with the ball in his hands in space. I would love to see them start using him on offense a little bit. Give him 8 to 10 snaps a game. Why not? I mean, as we saw a couple of years ago, he's dynamic, he's explosive, and he can make some big plays for you. Something that they can't do right now.
The fact you'd even have to say, did you go back to the Patricia days, speaks volumes about where they're at. But
hey, you say whatever you want about him. Their offense was much better than last year and this year.
I know. It's wild that we can even say that and have it be true. But I'm with you. But the other thing is, it feels like you almost can't do it if you lose him. Not only do you have one less DB, but you also have one less kind of skill guy in the return game. So I'm with you, but it's just, I feel like they don't even want to risk it right now.
I mean, again, I think if you're looking for somebody to make a play with you, play for you, I think he could be that guy. You are watching / listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I am your host, John Sirenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. Just a reminder, if you're in the market to sell your current home, purchase your first home, or refinance, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also email him at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, so we're going to move on here now and talk some college football. And, of course, Boston College was on a bye this past weekend. They return to action this Sunday when they take on Syracuse. UMass goes on to Mississippi State and plays well. They jumped out to a 10-0 lead, played well early, but the Bulldogs eventually figured things out and ended up winning 45-21. UConn beat Georgia State on Friday night to get to 6-3 and become bowl eligible. But Kevin, the story in New England Division I New England college football this fall continues to be the Rhode Island Rams, who defeated Monmouth in come-from-behind fashion, 37-28 to improve to 8-1 on the season, 5-0 in the CAA. I was there. I covered the game. I mean, it's amazing to me what this program is doing right now, Kevin. I mean, excuse me, that game looked all but lost. And yet their defense started making plays in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. And all of a sudden, they get a big stop when they're down 28-17 on a fourth down. That shifts the game in their favor. They get to within 4. They get another key stop late. And then Devin Farrell hits Marquise Buchanan on a 24-yard touchdown pass to make it 31-28. Monmouth attempts to go backyard at the end of the game. They're laddering the ball all over the place. Freddie Malay scoops up the fumble and scores to make it 37-28. But you listened to Jim Fleming today in his weekly press conference with the media. I mean, there's not enough you could say about the job he's done, this staff has done, and there's not enough you could say about this team, man. They're so tough. They're so gutsy. Look, I've been around that program for a long time. It's great to see.
It's funny, before the show, we were talking about them possibly having a bye in the postseason, not just ending a 39-year, playoff drought, but actually having a home playoff game and maybe having a bye for that home playoff game. You're right. They're the best story in New England, right up there with UConn and the Ivy League as always. But I asked Jim Fleming today, with 3 weeks left, first I asked him how you kind of make sure guys are staying locked in. You and I both know as college kids, social media is everywhere. They're hearing and seeing what people are saying about them. They're now ranked number 10 in the country. It's their highest ranking since 2001. How do you have college kids sort of ignore that? And Fleming said it's actually easier. Kids are more locked in right now because that goal is so close. So I found that interesting. And I asked him about practice. With 3 weeks left, and you well know, as a coach, preserving guys' bodies this time of year is such a hard kind of piece of the puzzle for a coach. So I asked Fleming, I said, how do you do that right now? And he had an interesting story about last week at practice. He said on Tuesday, he didn't really like how practice was going. And he said, tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm going to have to take the guys out of pads. And then all of a sudden, practice sort of picked up. He said, you know what, never mind. And he asked the senior players what they thought. And they all said, no, let's keep the pads on. So the leadership on that team is huge right now. And they sort of know what it takes to win because of the way that they've lost in previous years. And I've said this for a few weeks now. The fact that Jim Fleming is constantly using these past seasons, as the motivating factor is refreshing because you always hear coaches say, that's a different year. It's the here and now. But Fleming is using their mistakes in years past to make sure that doesn't happen again. So he's the perfect coach right now for the moment for URI, I think, in my opinion. And, this weekend's their hardest game remaining at Delaware, but they've created a situation for themselves where even if you lose this game, I think they're still in. They pretty much have to still be in unless you choke it away down the stretch, which is huge for them because, again, in years past, it's usually come down to the final week, but they have a cushion now. They really are just such a fun story. I hope they beat Delaware. They have a shot. Delaware is FBS bound, I believe, next year. So
yeah, they're not eligible to win the CAA.
Right. So it's going to be a hard game, but it's another great litmus test. Delaware is a perennial contender if they could, or if they continue to remain in the FCS, they'd be a threat in the CAA every single year going forward. They always are. So great test for URI this weekend, but having 7 straight wins and 5 of them become from behind wins, that's an incredible amount of mental toughness. It's a term that's thrown around a lot. This team has more than I've ever seen. Well, maybe not ever, but in a long, long time. Just a fantastic story.
Yeah, they are. They are. And again, I've said this before, and I even said this on Saturday. Our good friend Paige Messier and I did just a little quick breakdown of the game. And her and I were saying that this probably isn't even their best team the last 3 years. You can make an argument 2 years ago, 2022 was their best team in the last 5 years. So, I mean, again, I think that it just goes to show you that it isn't always about talent. It's about having the right mix in the locker room. And I also think there are other factors here. What does the rest of your conference look like? What do they have coming back? There's so many things in play that determine the direction of a season in football. And I think that everything aligned for them this year. The rest of the conference had graduated a lot of quality talent. They brought back a good senior group. They always do a great job in the portal. Flem, Coach Murph, the entire staff does a terrific job in recruiting. So I do think that everything lined up for them this year. It all aligned, and they've taken advantage of it. And look, this week's a tough game, but the reality is if they go down there and win, they're probably going to run the table.
Yeah,
you got Albany at home the week after, and Bryan is a rivalry game, and we know Chris Merritt's teams come to play, and they'll come to play. I mean, they put forth a pretty good effort this week against Stony Brook. So, but they have a pretty good chance of running the table here, which would be remarkable if this program can somehow find a way to go. If they won 11-1, even 10-2, it would be an unbelievable year for this program. It's a program that, for a long time, I think, was on the precipice of doing good things. There was some uncertainty there. If you remember a few years ago, there was talk that they were going to go non-scholarship and get out of the CAA, or they were going to reduce their scholarships and make the decision to stay. Now that decision is paying off, and in a big way. And I think this could open the door. There's going to be some renovations now to the facility. They're going to upgrade the stands. The hope is that they start putting some money into the practice facilities, but URI is in a good place here. And as Paige said, and I agree with her as an alumnus, you know, she being a URI alumnus, the school's becoming a football school now. You know, it's been forever regarded a basketball school, but you can be good at both. And I think, if anything, being good in football, I don't care what anybody says, being good in football raises your profile, whether you're FBS or FCS. All this can do is help. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and speaking of, if they go 11-1, they'd be undefeated in FCS play. Their only loss would be to Minnesota, which was on the road against old friend Max Brosman from UNH. So that's maybe even more impressive to go unbeaten at this level, which really is a parity-filled level, maybe even more so than FBS. So I want to ask you real quick about Meade Stadium too. Jim Fleming has talked about it a lot. He said, you know, it's sort of the thing to do, and you are at Rhode Island now. What is that atmosphere like? I haven't been down there. I've never covered a game there, so I'm curious.
It's terrific. I mean, they've been selling out games this year. It's a terrific atmosphere. The URI alumni is engaged. They're involved. The student section is pretty good. There's a good following. You know, one thing about Rhode Island is, whether it's PC basketball, PC hockey, URI basketball, now URI football, Brown football, Bryant football, they're into their college sports. It's a big college sports state. So the support has been tremendous, and certainly winning helps. You know, Flem talked about this after the game, where he said that, you know, with basketball season around the corner, he hopes that people, you know, don't start turning their attention just to basketball and forget about the football program. And he hopes that they have a great crowd on hand in 2 weeks against Albany for senior day. And he's right. I mean, again, no knock on the basketball program, but with the way this football program is playing right now, you shouldn't be fully turning your attention to basketball just quite yet. You have all winter to do that. So they're in a great place. And Jim and his staff have been building towards this for a long time. It took them a long time to get here, but they look like they're on track to win a CAA title and get that playoff berth, and that would be something for this program. Harvard had a big win on Saturday. They went on the road up to Hanover and beat previously undefeated Dartmouth 31-27 in a great game. Harvard getting a couple touchdowns from Charles DePrima. They rallied in the second half to win this one after Dartmouth had rallied from an early deficit. Big win for Harvard. They've now won 5 in a row since that Brown loss in week 2. And what can you say about the job that Andrew Orich and his staff have done? Harvard is squarely now in the driver's seat to win an Ivy League title.
Best offense in the Ivy League, and I don't think it's close. They have the best quarterback in Jaden Craig. I think he had over 300 yards again. I keep going back to what they're doing with the 2-quarterback system. You, as a guy who's worked with offenses for plenty of years, you always hear that cliche. You know, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. They legitimately have 2. And props to Charles DePrima now, sorry, for accepting the role and doing it so well. He had 3 rushing touchdowns the other day. I think he only had maybe 45 yards off the top of my head.
It's crazy to me what they're doing with him. I mean, he was their starting quarterback at times last season, and he's obviously a terrific athlete. And Jaden Craig beat him out this year, and they're using him as an athlete. And it's crazy what they're getting out of him from a production standpoint.
I've said it for a couple of weeks. He's the Taysom Hill of the Ivy League.
He really is. He really is.
And then you have the best receiver, I think, in the Ivy League, in Cooper Barcade. Every single week, he puts up stupid numbers. He was over 100, I think, again this week, along with Scott Woods. They have a guy in Seamus Gilmartin who no one talks about, but is a legitimate weapon. And then you have Xavier Bascon in the backfield. Like, their offense is almost impossible, to contain everybody. So a huge one with Columbia this weekend. But if they can get through that one, you have a very winnable game against Penn. And then you have a chance to clinch the Ivy League at home against Yale in the final week of the season. So firmly in the driver's seat. It won't be easy. Columbia is very, very good. I think they're coming in at 5-3 and also 3-1 in the league. But you mentioned Ulrich. The thing about him, and he's talked about this a lot, he didn't come in and just try to change everything. He said if it wasn't broke, don't fix it. He didn't do a lot. He let Mickey Fine do his thing on offense, and I think that's been huge to let the coaches that have been there continue coaching their guys who they've been coaching for years. So the fact that he has his own twist, there's definitely more of a how do I put this? There's a different intensity to that team on game day than maybe there was under Coach Murphy, but it's still very similar. But props to Ulrich for not coming in and just saying, this is what I'm going to do because it's my team now. And I think that's the biggest reason why Harvard is right back in the driver's seat again.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a great point. Look, he came in, he kept the majority of the staff. It's important that he kept the coordinators, both Mickey Fine and Scott Larkey stayed. I think that's been tremendous. Joe Lamb, who has been at Harvard forever, Harvard alumnus, son of the legendary Tom Lamb, a great coach in his own right. I've known Joel for a long time, one of the best offensive minds in the area. He stayed on staff. So it's great to see what Coach Orich has done there, because as we said when he got hired, it's not easy to fill those shoes. When you think of great coaches in Boston and New England sports history, Coach Murph needs to be in that conversation. What he did at Harvard for over 30 years is crazy. It's crazy what he built there. The program was good throughout the years, but he took it to a level of consistency that is in many ways unmatched. It's hard to do, especially in the Ivy League, where you don't have 45 or 60 or 80 scholarships to work with. You're really selling the school the Ivy League education and experience and hoping you could sell it to a national audience. And he and his staff did that as well as anybody in the Ivy League. So to follow those footsteps and to fill those shoes was never going to be easy. And Coach Orich has done a tremendous job, as is his staff. And I'd be remiss if I, again, don't continue to applaud the job that Sammy McCorkle and his staff have done at Dartmouth. I mean, they lose by 4. They went toe-to-toe with Yale, went toe-to-toe with Harvard, your preseason favorites in the Ivy League. They still have a shot at getting a piece of this. Anything can happen here these last 3 weeks. But kudos to Coach McCorkle, man. To step into that situation last year after what happened to Buddy Tevens and to win a share of the Ivy League and to get off to a 6-0 start this year, he's got that program humming. Those guys are believing. And again, they are far from out of it. They could very easily win a piece of this. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out down the stretch.
100%. For 2 years now, I've said he deserves more credit nationally than he's gotten for the spot that he was in. It's probably a good spot to just plug in the fact that the Ivy League is finally getting its collective head out of its ass and maybe allowing teams.
Stay classy, my friend.
We'll try. But we've been on this for years now. Hopefully they come to their senses and get this thing done and allow teams.
Well, I hope that comment you just made doesn't stem the tide.
No, but teams playing the postseason. Like, imagine if Harvard had a chance this year to make a playoff run with all the offensive talent they have. They can compete with anybody in the FCS. They're now ranked 25th in the country, but ultimately means very little, which is a shame. So hopefully that does work out pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, I if it does happen, it seems like it's still a long shot. I wrote about it over the weekend. If it does happen, I would imagine we probably won't see it until 2026, 2027. But the league winner needs to be playoff eligible for the Ivy League. We've said it forever. These kids not only deserve to have an opportunity to play for an Ivy League title, they deserve to have a shot at playing for a national title. The Ivy League has not allowed their schools to play in a playoff format since 1945. That's a long time. So it's been 77 years. So it's long overdue. They need to have that opportunity. They need to have the opportunity to play in the FCS playoffs, and you hope that happens. And by the way, I think my math was off there. But anyway, I suck at math, so it doesn't matter. And nonetheless, it's been a long time. So I think they deserve the opportunity to have a shot to play in the FCS playoffs, and you hope that now that the conversation has started up again and the wheels are turning, and it looks like it's a conversation that is being spearheaded by the Harvard student body. If they can convince the Harvard administration and the Yale administration gets on board, and then the other schools get on board, I think you're going to see this happen sooner than later by 2026, maybe 2027. But it would be great to see a Harvard or a Dartmouth or a Yale in the FCS playoffs. They certainly deserve that. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that UConn with their UConn with their win on Friday night against Georgia State, who they beat. I'm just trying to pull up the score here, who they beat 34-27, is now 6-3, and they're bowl eligible. And that was the last game of the season at the Rent. They got 3 more on the road, but they got 3 games here. They go to UAB this week, winnable game. Then they go to Syracuse next week, and then they finish the season off at UMass. They could very easily be anywhere from 8-4 to 7-5. And I think 7-5 is probably going to be a stretch here. I would say they're going to be favored. They are favored against UAB. They'll be favored against UMass. They can easily win 8 games here, Kevin. Go 8-4. Now you're looking at a pretty quality bowl bid and a big turnaround season for Jim Moore and the Huskies.
I've said 8 wins for about a month now. But the funny thing is they went 7-1 at home. But we talked about that 6-game, stretch they had where it was all home games. We had said all, off season, 4-2 bare minimum. I think they went 5-1. They took care of business, which is the most impressive part about it. It was a little disappointing to see the crowd that they got on Friday night, given how good that home fan base has been, or good, relatively speaking, by UConn and New England terms. So that's a little disappointing, but they go 8-4 and get a legitimate bowl game. You've said this for a while now. They'll travel well, no matter where they go. They traveled well down to Myrtle Beach a couple of years ago, assuming it's a warm-ish, weather destination. It'll be another huge sort of stepping stone for them. And they're in a better spot than most in terms of New England-wise, in terms of recruiting when it comes to the support behind them. And especially if they can get a bowl win under their belt, 2 times, in 3 years to be bowl eligible under Mora. That's no small feat.
No.
When you're a team in Connecticut.
Especially not at that program.
Correct.
I mean, it's been a struggle for UConn football in recent years.
Right.
And he has turned things around. And they've done a great job. We've talked about this throughout the offseason and during the season. They've done a great job in the portal, man. A terrific job in the portal. So, yeah, no, it's no small feat at all. I think it's a pretty big accomplishment for that program when you consider their recent history.
Yeah, and I could see them beating Syracuse, too. It'll be hard. Don't get me wrong. Syracuse is still obviously a very good team. They should beat Boston College this weekend, if we're being honest. But I could see them winning 9 games. But 8 wins should be the bare minimum expectation now.
Yeah, no, I agree. Turning our attention to high school football, of course, the MIAA playoff brackets were unveiled yesterday afternoon, and we got to see all the different matchups from divisions 1 through 8. We'll have our bracket breakdown and preview for you tomorrow. But Kevin and I thought it'd be good to give you our top games and matchups to watch from the first round of the playoffs, which kick off this weekend. Pretty much every game, with the exception of one, is going to be played Friday night. But Kevin, one of the things we want to do is point out a couple matchups here that fans can look forward to that might be worth taking in if you're looking for a high school game this weekend. So we're going to start with Division One. The number 1 seed in Division One is St. John's Prep. They came back last week to beat BC High after a tough loss to CM. They are the number 1 overall seed in D1. If there's some interesting matchups in Division One, for me, the matchup that I'm looking forward to the most, and we're going to end up covering this game, is Franklin at Methuen. This is a pretty interesting matchup. Franklin turnaround season under Todd Kiley in his first year. The former Holliston coach has done a terrific job with the Panthers. They will go to Methuen to take on Shane Easton and the Rangers, who've been very impressive. And I've said this, I think if you're looking for a sleeper team in Division One, I think that team is Methuen.
Yeah, it should be. Arguably, it's the best game of the weekend locally. First of all, good for Todd Kiley for going to Franklin and sort of keeping up and maintaining the expectation for that program. You never know with a new head coach. I know he's been very successful at Holliston, but again, change of scenery. You've been through it. It's not easy sort of getting adapted to a new program, new families to get used to, all that. So, but that is going to be a very difficult game for Franklin. I'm looking at Central Catholic and Weymouth. I know it's a 12 versus 5, but Central Catholic has not been the same this year, I don't think. I could see Weymouth winning that game. And then if just one other one would be Springfield Central and Natick. That's a complete toss-up, in my opinion. I think Natick surprised some people, at least surprised me this year. I thought they need maybe one more year to get back to being, quote unquote, typical Natick. But I could see them beating Springfield Central. I really could.
I can't. I think Springfield Central is one of the two favorites in D1. Yeah, they're ranked 7th because of strength of schedule and nothing else. You can make an argument that they're one of the two favorites in D1. I also disagree with you on Central Catholic. I think Coach Sexton and that staff have done a great job bouncing back. Program has turned around. Weymouth, look, Mike Donovan's done a great job. They're certainly capable of going up there and winning, but Central Catholic's had a nice bounce back year. But yeah, to me, I think when I look at the D1 bracket, I think that the 4 teams that I think are going to be playing for the right to go to Gillette are going to be St. John's Prep. I think you're going to get, you're going to get St. John's Prep. I think you're going to get Needham. You're going to get Springfield Central, and I think you're going to get Zavarian ultimately. I think that's how your Final Four will break down in D1.
I love that Needham team. I've loved them for a couple of years now. Coach Kopsko has done just a hell of a job sort of bringing them back from the absolute abyss a few years ago. No one took Needham seriously, and I'd make the argument they can give Prep a run if they end up playing each other. I believe that'd be the Final Four, if I'm looking at it right. Yeah, it'd be the Final Four. So that might be one of the best games of the year if those two end up matching up. I'm with you. I do think Prep ultimately ends up winning out again. It's just, yes, they were embarrassed by CM, but had a nice bounce back win. And I do think Brian St. Pierre usually has his teams ready to go for that deep playoff run.
All right, in Division II, a game I'm looking at is Bishop Fian hosting North Andover on Friday night. Fian is currently the 4 seed in D2. Of course, Catholic Memorial, number 1 team in the state, number 1 seed in D2. They're going to be hosting Quincy. Another matchup that is intriguing to me in the D2 bracket is the Winchester-Peabody matchup, which is a 6-11 matchup. Those are a couple of the matchups that I'll be watching in Division II.
Yeah, I was going to say that Winchester game. I saw them against Reading a couple weeks ago. They should have beat Reading. Just missed a field goal though in the last second to lose that game. But the other one for me, and we're going to cover it, is Feehan and North Andover. North Andover seating wise may not look like a formidable foe, but that's going to be a hell of a game. I think Jared Keene's going to be there for us. Feehan, always a threat, but that North Andover team is always a good team come playoff time. Might get slept on a little bit here.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think Feehan is the better team, and they're at home. And as far as the Final Four there, I think you'll have CM and Feehan on the left side of the bracket. I think KP and Marshfield will come out of the right side of the bracket. I think in D2, you're going to get a terrific Final Four. Of course, if CM and King Philip get through their respective side of the bracket, it could set up for a potential third meeting in the last 4 years in the Super Bowl in Division II. Division III, Reading is your number 1 seed. They went undefeated, bounce back year for the Rockets. And when you look at that D3 bracket, a couple of matchups that stick out to me. Hingham Walpole, and they're on the same side of the bracket. It's a 7-10 matchup, and then Dartmouth Milton, a 6-11 matchup. Those are 2 intriguing games to me. Division III is wide open. I think coming into the year, we had pegged Milton, North Attleboro, Billerica as being potential favorites, but the bracket's wide open, man. Legitimately, anybody can come out of Division III.
Yeah, when we were making our schedule, we talk about first round is usually weak. I don't think there's a weak game in this bracket. I really don't. I mean, even the Reading Lynn English game, you never know. Like, Reading's probably going to win by multiple scores, but I don't think it'll be as lopsided as some other first-round games. You mentioned that the Dartmouth game, friend of the show, Andy Hart, his son Jackson Hart, one of the best players, one of the more underrated players, I should say, in the state. but I think he needs to have a big game. Milton, look, they won a Super Bowl last year. They're an 11th seed, but Dombrowski's a hell of a coach.
Yeah.
He'll have that team ready
They're
to
a
go.
tough 11 seed.
Yeah. So that is not a typical sort of 11 versus 6 by any means. And then just looking at as well, that Westboro team, it might just be because I covered them for so many years with the Metro West Daily News, and they always struggle. But first of all, it's great to see them in the postseason. But I could see them giving West Springfield some trouble on Friday night. That's a very intriguing game for me. And then obviously, Milford's been down this year by their standards, but Milford Masco 8 versus 9 is going to be a hell of a game too.
Yeah, as far as the Final Four, in my opinion, that comes out of D3, I think you're going to have Reading, North Attleboro, Billerica, and I think, you know what, this might surprise some people. I think Mansfield comes out of that bottom right tier there. They're the 3 seed. They're playing their best football at the right time of the year. Big one on Friday night against Canton. I could see North and Mansfield potentially meeting up in the D3 Super Bowl. I don't think we saw it last year with Walpole Milton, all Bay State Super Bowl. I think this year you might get an all Hawks Super Bowl with North and Mansfield, 2 longtime rivals. They played a couple of weeks ago at Alumni Field in Mansfield, and North Attleboro won that game 14-10. So you might get a rematch there, just like we saw last year in Division 3. Division 4, your top overall seed is Duxbury. They'll be hosting 16th seeded Holliston this week. Scituate has been a monster all season long in D4. They have rolled along. In terms of matchups that I'm looking for in D4, the Tewksbury-Westwood matchup is an intriguing matchup for me at 5-12. I also look at that Burlington-Wayland matchup. You're going to be there Friday night. That's an intriguing matchup as well. And then Marblehead-Norwood. Norwood struggled on Saturday losing to Holliston. They got to do the long bus ride up to Marblehead. Marblehead's played some terrific football the last few weeks, but that could be an intriguing matchup as well.
Yeah, I think Tewksbury-Westwood's the one there. Duxbury-Holliston's interesting, but it's just Duxbury, I think, is just too good for that to ultimately be a close game. Tantasco's a team we don't really talk about. I don't want to say enough, but just in general, they don't get talked about very much because they're out in CMAS. But that game won't be easy for Canton by any means. Obviously, it's 8 versus 9. It won't be easy regardless. But I think Tantasco might win that game against the Bulldogs. You mentioned Burlington Wayland. I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be a very physical, I feel like very low scoring game. And then Grafton, it's weird to say that we don't talk about them enough either because they're so good every year. Coach McMahon is a hell of a coach. He always has his guys ready to go in the postseason. I expect them to make a run too.
My predicted Final Four is Duxbury, Malden Catholic, Scituate, and Grafton. There you go.
So, yeah, I'm with you there.
Those are my predicted Final Four there. All right, heading over to Division 5, looking at some of the first-round matchups. Some interesting matchups here. The 5-12 matchup, Fenwick-Norton, is a pretty interesting matchup. I also think that the 3-14 matchup, Foxborough versus Danvers, also a pretty interesting matchup. Foxborough's the 3 seed, the defending Division 5 champs. Your thoughts on any of the other games that you're looking at in D5, and how do you see D5 shaking out?
So just looking, it's interesting. Auburn and Blackstone Valley. Again, I go back to my Metro West days, covering Blackstone Valley so much. That's another staff that always has their guys ready to go around postseason time. And BVT always, it seems like always makes a run to at least a semifinal or a trip to Gillette. So if they can get past Auburn, I could see them giving Hanover a run in that next game. Although Hanover should be and is obviously one of the favorites with the 2nd seed. And Foxborough Danvers. Danvers doesn't get nearly enough credit, I don't think, for what they do. And Foxborough is obviously, again, a perennial contender. But you mentioned the other ones too. It feels like another bracket, maybe not wide open, but could be some surprises in there too.
Yeah, my Final Four for D5 are Shawsheen, Old Rochester. I'm going to go with Hanover and Foxborough. I think that those are probably the 4 best teams right now in D5, and I think that they're probably going to be the ones to emerge. But you never know. I mean, that's why it's a tournament. You have to get in, play well, and hope you advance. D6 might be the deepest division of the 8. I mean, D3 is wide open because there's a lot of uncertainty. D6 is wide open because you could have any one of 5 or 6 teams potentially win it all in D6. As far as matchups that I'm looking at, the Sandwich St. Mary's matchup is a terrific matchup. I think our partner Adam Kirchen said it best this morning when we were chatting that could be like a sectional final type matchup. That's a pretty intriguing matchup. Linfield Dennis Yarmouth is an intriguing matchup, and even Hudson and East Bridgewater. I mean, Hudson has been rolling people all season long, but East Bridgewater has been a pleasant surprise. That could be a decent matchup as well. What game are you looking at here?
So we'll be at Sandwich, if I could speak again, Sandwich St. Mary's. Jared Keane will be there. I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. It's North Reading. For me, North Reading is always, in the hunt there in the end. And as a 13 seed, I think they're going to get overlooked. Norwell is good, but that North Reading team has postseason experience. So looking at that one, Abington Winthrop could be interesting too. Again, Abington is a team that has significant playoff experience and history, but Winthrop is no pushover. So I'm with you on the bracket in general being wide open. I think Stoneham is probably a favorite there. If not Hudson, I'd only put Stoneham ahead of them just because Hudson doesn't have the same experience when it comes to the postseason as Stoneham. But yeah, it's wide open again.
Yeah, my final 4 in D6 are Hudson. I'm going to go Hudson, Abington, Stoneham, and then I'm going to go Fairhaven. I mean, I think a lot of people are forgetting about how good Fairhaven is. They're the defending D6 champs. Justin Marks, the machine, he's back. So they could still very well be the favorite in D6. All right, D7 is up next. Of course, Uxbridge is the number 1 overall seed, the defending D7 champion. Matt Blood has done a tremendous job with the Spartans. So there's a couple of interesting matchups there, Kevin, for me. I like the 7-10 matchup. Cohasset, West Bridgewater is an intriguing matchup. I also think Mashpee and St. Bernard's is a really good first-round matchup as well. And I'm also looking at Northbridge, Oxford. I mean, if Coach Ken LaChapelle wins this week, I believe it would be his 400th win, which is crazy. But when you look at D7, Uxbridge looks like a strong favorite, but there's a couple of teams there, namely Mashpee, possibly Northbridge. There's a couple of teams there that could surprise.
For me, so I'm with you on those games, and I love Coach LaChapelle covering Northbridge back in the day. You want to talk about tradition and sort of that classic football program. Northbridge is certainly up there. For me, it's Gardner and Manchester Essex. And I always say that because, and again, we cover all of New England, but Gardner's sort of an unknown, I feel like, around the state, just because they haven't been sort of there in years past. So that's really interesting to me. And then just the bracket in general, there's a lot of Western Mass flair, which is good for that part of the state.
And it's nice to see. And it's nice to see everybody's favorite Western Mass school back in it, Coach Campbell.
Yep.
By Wacona. They're back in it. No, but it's a stupid thing that I do.
I got it. It took me a minute. I was born in the 80s. It took me a minute, but I recognized it. I can't get it out of my head now. It's so dumb. But no, again, it's for Western Mass. Admittedly, we don't do as much as we should. But it is nice to see that many teams out there that could make a run. Again, I feel like this is fairly wide open too. Maybe not as much. Uxbridge is. They should still be.
They look good.
Favorite. Yeah. They are what they are. But again, good to see Western Mass well represented.
Yeah, for my final 4 here in D7, I'm going to go Uxbridge. I'm going to go Northbridge. I think Coach LaChapelle has another run in him here, and the Rams could make a deep run. I'm going to go Clinton, and then I'm going to go Mashpee. I think Mashpee, Coach Rivieri, has Mashpee back in contention. They're the 3 seed. Could be a sneaky potential contender here that could win it all in D7. And finally, we have D8. Randolph is your number 1 seed. The Blue Devils have had a great season. A couple matchups that intrigue me in D8. Cathedral Millis, they're going to be playing at West Roxbury High School on Friday night. That's an interesting matchup. And then the 6-11 matchup, Kip versus Bourne. So Those are the two matchups that intrigue me in D8.
West Boylston and Hoosick for me. I know it's a 15-2, but that Hoosick Valley team can give people trouble. And then the other one for me, you mentioned, I'm just trying to find it again. No, you know what? Yeah, Cathedral Millis. That Millis team was down the last couple years, but we know the past history of that program under the Olsen twins when they were winning Super Bowls. That's a team that can go on a run if they got hot. But again, Randolph they're the proper 1 seed, but I could see them being knocked off. I really could at some point during this road.
Yeah, as far as my Final Four are concerned, I'm going to go Randolph. I'm going to go Cathedral. I'm going to go West Boylston. You can't bet against Mike Ross and the Lions. I mean, they've won back-to-back state titles, and they have a very good chance of three-peating. And then, of course, I'm going to go with Carver. I think that they get back there. They get back to the Final Four. They're going to end up probably having a rematch, a Super Bowl rematch with West Boylston. But I think Carver has enough back, especially a quarterback with Balzerini. I think that they can make a run and potentially get back to Gillette if they can get past West Boylston. All right, Kevin, great job with the brackets again. Stay tuned, follow along for all your MIAA playoff needs, as well as we're going to be covering playoff games in other parts of the region as well in the coming weeks. So stay tuned there. Final thoughts here, Stone.
Same as always, we appreciate the help, especially this time of year when we're trying to cover as many games as humanly possible. I believe it'll be at 8 on Friday night and 5, either 4 or 5 on Saturday. It's the best time of the year for us, but it's not possible without people helping us out. Whether it's a subscription, a T-shirt, a hat, polo shirt, do some Christmas shopping on the team store. We'd appreciate it.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. For Kevin Stone, I'm John Sirenitas. We'll be back with you next Monday night, Veterans Day night. Until then, have a good week, have a safe week, and get out there and enjoy some of these high school football playoff games. And if you don't have the time to do that on a Friday night, get out there and catch a college football game on Saturday. Football season's on the back nine now, folks. Are coming down the stretch here. It's almost over, so get out and enjoy it. Till next week, peace.
See ya.